Willie, first of all, how are you through all this craziness? We're in, I think, week 4 or 5 of the coronavirus where it's really hitting us. What's going on in your world just day to day before we get into some fun stuff? You okay? Everybody healthy?
Oh, yeah, no, it's been, actually, it's been easy, Tony. I mean, hell, we're out in the country.
Yeah.
And, it hasn't been, Steph's been home for a month. And, we're going into our second year of being married. If you can handle it for a month under the same roof, going nowhere. It's not a 12 by 12 foot cell, but it's been fun.
So you're on the honeymoon still?
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, we got to wash them. Got to get them sheets washed every other night.
There we go. So let's take I need to know, we haven't really spoke since the movie came out, Uppity.
Oh, Tony, I've been overwhelmed at the response, not necessarily from the racing community, but outside of the sport.
There's no sport more exciting than racing. This is the next best thing to heaven.
They called me Uppity, and I loved it.
People that don't follow sports, people don't follow racing, and I've been getting messages worldwide every day. When we launched on Netflix, we launched February the 5th, and for 1 week on Netflix, we trended #1. And that started to, it let me know how strong the piece was, and we're in 17 countries. People are watching it, and people are buying it as well on chassis.com. And that's Adam Carolla's company, Chassis with a Y, CHASSY.com. Chassis is also selling the DVD, but what's not on Netflix is the outtakes. And some of the personal stories that Bobby Unser and Al Unser Jr. and my mom and my ranch hogs that I had when I was on the ranch. So there's some personal stories on there that's in the DVD that are really strong. And that Netflix, of course, they don't do that. They go straight to the film.
Clearly, the impact of the movie will go much broader than the racing community. And I'm not sure Adam Carolla, when he set out to do the movie with you, understood how wide it would be received. When he did the Paul Newman movie, it was still in the racing community because of the race spin, but Paul Newman was Paul Newman. I think when he did yours, I think it probably had more of a think in the racing community, but I thought Adam, if he did anything in the movie, it was fantastic. But he got to your soul where you told the story and you could feel the pain.
For my own self-preservation, I never showed that side. I couldn't, because that I thought that might have shown some weakness or some cracks. And I was dealing with an industry that what most weren't in love with me, and if they could find some cracks, they were going to do it. And so I was, and my grandfather, he just didn't tolerate it. He was born in 1899, and he was old school, and he became a successful businessman, and he just drilled it in me. When I was on the ranch with him, he just drilled it in me. You must be tough. You must not accept defeat. You must. And he didn't, and he wasn't a doting man. And then he'd put a shovel in your hand and say, "Now get out and get that dish done."
I'm either in the race or you peel me off the cement.
When we started filming, I didn't know that I could go into myself like that. I didn't know until I started. Then I started reliving it. I started reliving episodes that when I was younger, I would throw it in the back. I would put it away. I didn't want to focus on that. All I wanted to focus on was going as fast as I could and winning. And that was it. All the rest of that emotional stuff, I couldn't go to anybody and say, well, poor me, or I wasn't going to go to the media and say I've been mistreated.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that came to mind is, Jackie Robinson is so known as breaking the barrier in baseball. Do you feel that?
Not at all, Tony. I was born into the sport, and all I knew was race drivers. I mean, I knew who Cassius Clay was, who became Muhammad Ali, but racing was my family. That's what my dad did, and everyone, the people that I followed were racing drivers, from Jim Clark to Dan Gurney to Fangio. Those were, and as I got older, then became Bobby Unser and AJ, and those were role models. And that's where I wanted to go. There was not one time in my life where I thought, especially when I started racing in England, there was not an issue at all. And the treatment I got in England was just wonderful, and all that mattered is I went fast. And when Bernie Ecclestone, in my very fourth race, my career, when Bernie and Gordon Murray came to Brands Hatch to meet me, that was it. That was, and they said, we just wanted to meet you and tell you that we're watching.
Speaking of Ecclestone, you sent me a text the other day. I'm on the couch, half asleep, my phone beeps, and you sent me a text about Bernie. You care to share that with the group?
Well, I'm sure most everyone knows now. I always, Bernie, when he did his piece in the film Uppity, we went to his office in London, and his office was up on the second floor. Or was it the third floor? It was in the conference room, and he owns the whole building. It's all Formula One. So we met him in his office at 11 a.m. We were all set up in there, and instead of coming up the elevator, he runs up the stairs. Now, at that time, he was 86 years old. He comes trotting up the stairs into the office, and we hear him trotting up the stairs, and he walks in and he says, I got a young wife. He says, I got to stay in shape. I said, so you're still hitting it? He says, oh yeah, I'm still hitting it. When the news just came out at 89 years old that he's going to have a baby boy, I mean, every man over 75 years old should get on their knees to Bernie every time they see him. Sometimes, it takes more than one blue pill, maybe the whole damn bottle. Maybe a fork, it might take a forklift for some cats, right? So, for him to shoot out anything other than powdered milk is amazing.
Well, so we'll have a toast to Bernie at some point when we get back to racing. Let's shift gears a little bit. You are one of the most winningest drivers in Trans Am. I'm affiliated with Trans Am now. 17 wins overall. Just give me your take as, one of the most winningest drivers. Am I on the right track? Are we on the right track? What should we do? And I think John's doing a great job, but I'd love to hear your perspective. Well,
the glory years, and I was a young man. Well, actually, I was a teenager when in the 60s, when Parnelli Jones and Dan Gurney, Swede Savage, and Peter Revson, Mark Donahue, and you go down the list of all the legendary race drivers that raced in Trans Am, and manufacturer driven, right? And then it went on to a lull for a while. Then the manufacturers got back in it in the 80s when I was involved, Ford versus Chevy versus Audi versus Well, I raced for the Roush, but before that, I was Rookie of the Year with Diatley. The deal that Paul Newman did for me. Newman called me in Thanksgiving of 1982, 2 days before Thanksgiving, says, I've got a deal for you. And it's a Trans Am team and based in Portland. They've got a big sponsor. It's going to be well financed. And that was my first year. That was my rookie year. And I was Rookie of the Year that year in 1983. I won 5 races. Hobbs won the championship, but Hobbs won 4 races. And then beginning in 1984, I had a disagreement with another driver that got me fired from Diatley. And it wasn't my teammate either. It wasn't Hobbs. And then I got a call from Michael Cranefuss at Ford. He was head of SVO, Special Vehicle Operations at Ford. Him and Edsel Ford were on the phone. And I was fired on Sunday and hired on Monday. And Edsel told me, he says, look, we're interested in one thing, and that's beating Chevrolet. And I said, well, you just made the right phone call. And so I won a lot of races with Roush. And I even, and where I knew I was really a good driver and beyond good is when I could take a private Trans Am car and beat the factory. And I did. I took Les Lindley's. Les Lindley was just a private owner who had some money, but he didn't have factory assistance. And we could still win in his V6 Camaro, and we did. We beat Audi, we beat Roush, we beat Bradford, we beat the factory.
Tell me, you were influenced by Muhammad Ali, and as I think a lot of people in this world is, but then you used that influence with Scott Pruitt at Portland. What happened?
Then the on-track altercation that would lead to an off-track fight. Ribbs and Pruitt go at it. Scott is knocked out of the contest. But Willy T battles back to finish second to Chris Cord in one of Dan Gurney's Toyotas. Bruce Jenner led the Roush team with a third-place finish.
A lot of people think that Scott was my number one enemy. Actually, Scott and I were rivals. I think my enemy was really Jack Roush. Scott was, Pruitt was the front man, and he was under pressure, and to beat me. And I knew that, and I especially knew that later on. Since we met it, we ended up running into each other at St. Elmo's at Indy a few years ago and talked about it and talked about how great a show we put on, and we did. But Scott, he's not even in my top 5 most disliked, hated, if you will, enemies. Not at all. He's not even in the top 5.
You want to share the top 5?
No, that's going to be for the sequel. That's going to be for Uppity 2.
Tell me, we've had some pretty interesting experiences around the VROC. You have raced in every VROC charity program I've had. Not a lot of people can say that, but you have. There's two completely end of the spectrum moments that when I think of VROC and I think of you, the first one is the first year. And it started with us meeting at the race. You went out for a practice. 2 in the morning, the night before our feature, before the driver's meeting, I get this text that says, I had to leave the event.
I hadn't been in a racing car in I don't know how long. And the car owner that I was supposed to race, as you mentioned, it started raining the evening before the race. He got spooked and he left.
And long story short, I made the decision to just give you my car. I couldn't drive in the race because I was marshal in the race, but fixed you up with Edward as a co-driver, which has become a pretty formidable team, which we'll talk about in a minute. But you jumped in my car cold. You had zero, never even sat in it prior to the driver change in the middle of the race, and drove the wheels off that thing and put it on the podium.
Don't you ever whine about my arm?
I love you, babe.
You drove the shit out of me.
I was learning as fast as I could.
Well, it was an honor to get to drive with Willy T today. I've been watching him since I was a little kid. My father was racing Trans Am at the same time he was.
My teammate did a hell of a job. He handed me a good horse, and we rode it. Put it away wet, baby.
You get to the press announcement, the press conference, and people are asking you questions, and they asked you about your experience in the car.
Would you care to explain, sir?
I got a phone call at 9 o'clock in the morning, and they told me what car I was in. And I got in it for the race. I had never sat in it until it was time, till my teammate jumped out of it, and he said, "After you, my dear." And as a matter of fact, I don't even have racing socks on. Just bare feet, no underwear. I'm driving, no, I'm serious. I'm driving commando.
Commando. All the way in.
Right, no Hans device, no balaclava.
It was one of those, and racing should be fun. And drivers put their lives out on the line, and sometimes you really appreciate life. You know, you gotta see the funny side of it. You gotta, or to wreck you. It'll wreck you mentally.
This past year was amazing. I know that can't compare with winning Indy 500 or winning a big national race, but it's still Indy. What did it mean to you? Did it mean anything to you?
To win it, and winning anything at Indy's big, but you got to remember the people that are in your show, the men and women that are in VROC are big names. One of them just was inducted into the Hall of Fame, and his name is Bobby Labonte. He's just got inducted in the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Al Unser Jr., Paul Tracy, Max Pappas, Bodine, Skinner. These guys are Davy Jones, Wally Don. These guys are heavy breathers. So to win at Indy with the names, the only way you can be a champion in boxing is you got to beat champions. And that was, qualifying at Indy 500 was the biggest thing ever. But to win that race at Indy last year it meant a lot. It's sort of hard to explain how much that means.
Me and my partner have been at the front nearly every race, and we had some difficulties with mechanicals, but we did it. We, like Joe Namath says, we did it.
See you, Willie.
Hey, we might be a little heavier, and we might lost a couple of steps, but that intensity is still there. And this year, we were all set to go. I mean, drivers. I mean, I got a call from Bobby Labonte. He says, "You're lucky." He says, "You're lucky that we're on hold." He said, I got a call from Al Unser Jr. Al, he was going to race a car called Mr. Feathers. That was Al Jr.'s car for this year, Mr. Feathers. He said that was all I was going to see was feathers, right? And Skinner and Bodine, those guys look like Twiggy now. That's how much weight they've lost, all to win the VROC championship.
It's it's been fun to see it come together. There's no question. Just closing out, Willie. I so value our friendship and have so much fun running with you. Anything in your life, I'll close it out with this. Anything in your life you wish you could do over?
You know what, I don't know, Tony. I just think that pretty much 90% I've done everything the same. I might have not jumped at opportunities that I jumped at so fast. I mean, you know, and that has everything to do with youth. You know, you're looking for every opportunity you can. And I'm going to tell you what, despite all the negatives that I got in the sport, there were some really great people. There was Jim Truman, and there was Paul Newman, and there was just some awesome people. Gurney, that's all they cared about was winning, and they knew what was happening, and they were like, "We're not going to let this happen," and we're pushing along.
Well, it's thanks so much for doing this today. It's fun hooking up with you.
All right, TP. As usual, we'll do it again, and stay warm up in New York, because I'm staying hot down here in Texas.